causing it.
He's been an incredible boss, but more importantly, he's been a very dear friend. We appreciate and recognize the sacrifices that he's made over the years with time away from his children.
If we had a Congress full of Steve LaTourettes, we would not have the problems that we have today. People would actually get things done, and it would be a better country for it.
This isn't so much the end of a chapter as the beginning of a new chapter. And knowing how Steve feels about people and about how he feels about public service, I know we'll see Steve back again in some way, out there helping people as he always has been.
Hi, I'm U.S. Senator Rob Portman. I'm sorry I can't be with you there in person, but I'm really honored to have the opportunity to join you by video and help congratulate my friend, former Congressman Steve LaTourette, on receiving the Levin College of Urban Affairs Public Service Award. Thanks to President Ron Berkman and to Dean Ned Hill for your stewardship of CSU and for picking such a great honoree. And to my friends Dick Pogue and Bruce Akers, thank you for co-chairing tonight's festivities, and more broadly, thanks for doing so much for the greater Cleveland community. You've made this a really successful event, raising funds for CSU students seeking careers in public service. But back to the man of the hour, Steve LaTourette. He has had an exemplary career in public service. He's done a lot for Northeast Ohio, the entire Buckeye State, and for our country. And what a great example he serves to those students who want to go into public service. Probably because he got such a good start at CSU's Cleveland Marshall College of Law, he tirelessly served Greater Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, first as Lake County prosecutor and then representing the 14th Congressional District for 18 years. In Congress, Steve was pragmatic and someone who worked to find solutions. And as a member of the powerful House Appropriations Committee, he was helpful to CSU and many other Greater Cleveland institutions. He was dean of our delegation of Ohio members, and in a sense, Steve was an old-fashioned guy, in the sense that he was a guy who put solving problems ahead of partisan labels. For example, there's a critical project in my old congressional district in southern Ohio, many miles from Lake County. This project has national implications and is essential for ensuring that we can produce the enriched uranium for our power plants, the tritium for our nuclear arsenal, and for other purposes for our nuclear navy. I will tell you, without Steve LaTourette's help, this project would have been in great jeopardy. So he helped not just his area of Ohio, but the whole state. And then there's my favorite Steve LaTourette story. When Republican leaders in Washington first approached Steve about running for Congress, they said, you know, why don't you shave off your beard? And I was in this meeting. He said, you know what? This is who I am. And almost 19 years later, the beard is still there, as well as the attitude. So good night, Godspeed to you, Steve LaTourette, the important work you'll continue to do for our area, for our state, and our country, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here tonight, and I have the pleasure of not only being here for my dear friend Steve LaTourette, but to introduce Senator Voinovich, who I actually started with in politics back in 1982-3 when I came home from law school, and I was recruited to work for him as then mayor. So he's a great guy. You got to meet him. And I liked him so much, he talked me into working in a call center in the bottom of the Osborne building night after night, because I knew in our heart it was the right thing to do. But it was a long way with politics. First I started as a public defender. My friend Steve LaTourette was a public defender. And then we both became prosecutors in 1988. And you know what? We didn't get a single position at the OPAA because we were both former public defenders. Because we believe that everybody makes mistakes and there were problems in life, but there weren't problems that couldn't be solved. And we worked together, and it was an honor to work with him shoulder to shoulder on many different issues. But what I was most proud of was the fact that we worked together as prosecutors in combining our offices. It was the first time it had been done in the state of Ohio. We talked about it, and since he represented the state of Ohio and I represented the state of Ohio, although we were in different counties, it was jobs that were being sent to outside counsel, and we cured those conflicts by working together, and we handled each other's cases, and I was proud to work with him. And as hard as I worked for him to become a congressman, there was no one more upset than me that I no longer had him to call on with the problems I had in the prosecutor's office, because he had matters of the world to take care of. But you'll find no better friend than Steve LaTourette. And as I tell people on the floor when they ask now, where did you come from? I tell them Ohio 14, they give you a curious look. I say, I took Steve LaTourette's seat. Oh, he was the greatest guy. He was so sharp. He understood issues. And I said, he's still here. He's got a really nice office across the street. You can go see him anytime. And one day I said, I was joking in a group, and I said, he's really taking his retirement thing seriously. The cell phone number I had for him, it's changed. I called over the office, that number that they said it was his office, and that didn't exist either. And like Billy Jack, the next day he was in, what are you telling people that you can't get a hold of me for? I'm here. And he's always been there, and he'll always be there for all of us, and I'm honored to have him as a friend. And I'm also honored to have our next, the man who's going to stand up here and introduce us, former Mayor, Governor, Senator George Voinovich, an honest and steadfast man who taught Steve and I, as we were working up our way through the ranks, something that we both used on many different occasions, saying that we had to work harder and smarter, we had to do more with less, and that's something I'm trying to do today and following the tradition of both of you. When I take my seat in Washington, I'm trying to do more with less, and I'm honored to say that my former senator, but my dear friend George Voinovich is going to make the introduction of my dear friend Steve LaTourette.
David, and do a good job with the job you have, and the future will take care of itself. I'm here pitch hitting for the governor, and when Ned came to me and said that would you be willing to present the in tribute of public service to Steve LaTourette, I said absolutely. I'm lucky that I have an office here in the College of Urban Affairs, and as I walk around, I see Maxine Levin's picture every day. Maxine and I got to know each other. She was a very close friend of my mother's. I look at the pictures on the wall and I think about all the people who have contributed to me during my public service career that came out of Cleveland State University. I think so often we forget that the real success that we have are the kinds of people that are attracted and are willing to work for us, that are motivated and want to make a difference for their community. So Steve, I'm honored to be asked to present this. I got this award back in 1989 when I finished my job as mayor of the city of Cleveland. And I want you to know that I proudly displayed it in the governor's office and in the Senate. But little did I know when I got the award recognition that I'd have 20 more years in public service. So, Steve, you never know. I've known Steve for 20 years, and I remember your campaign when you were running in '94, and you ran against a very qualified Eric Fingerhut. I knew it was going to be a tough race, but I got to know Steve, and I was impressed with his interpersonal and communication skills, wide peripheral vision, empathy for the problems facing the district, intellectual capacity, and a desire to win the race and go on, and I thought he'd make a great congressman. As you know, he won with 48% of the vote. There were 4 candidates, and since that time, Steve, you haven't had any problems winning elections. I think your average is about 60%. It's a good indication of the way the folks felt about you in your district. And you had a challenging district, Steve. 7 counties, 22 cities, 34 villages, 63 townships. And I really believe that the district that you represented contributed to your success. Because as we mentioned earlier in the program over at the school, that you had to respond to a broad constituency. And I really believe that if we had more districts in this country like Steve LaTourette's, this country would be a whole lot better, and we would not have the gridlock that we'd have today in Washington. I was impressed with the way you worked with other colleagues in the delegation. Dennis Kucinich. Now, there was a time when I had a little question about it, Steve. Stephanie Jones, Marcia Fudd. But the fact is, you just, they got together and said, hey, we're elected, let's get out there and work together and let's see if we can't make a difference for Northeastern Ohio. And Steve, you've never disappointed me, your constituents, or your colleagues, Northeast Ohio. You chose to work on behalf not only of your district, but Northeast Ohio and our country, and you are a fiscal conservative, moderate Republican. And it's really interesting, folks, that Steve commands the respect of the Speaker of the House, John Boehner. John considers Steve as one of his best friends and colleagues, and it just goes to show the immense capacity that he has in his ability to reach out to all kinds of people. Over the years, I've had to work with Steve on some committee assignments. Steve, one of my regrets is that you and I didn't spend more time together, but I can tell you one thing, folks, our staffs worked very well together and made lots of music together for this area. You were on Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I was in Transportation and Infrastructure in the Senate. You were co-chair of the Great Lakes Task Force. I was co-chair of the Senate Great Lakes Task Force. You were appointed Appropriations in 2009. I was appointed in 2009. We both believe, folks, in earmarks. They are the yeast that raises the dough. And frankly, Steve, you are a whole lot better at it than I am. I'd be interested to see, and I hope you do this sometime, is make a list of all of those earmarks and the difference that you made for all kinds of things. You talk about Cleveland State. This guy, unbelievable in what he did. And, Lou Stokes was great at it. You're either tied or you're just right behind him in terms of what you were able to do. I recall some things of significance, Steve. The highway bill, 2005 reauthorization, Safety Lou. I don't know if you folks know this or not, but working together, it was the best transportation bill this state ever had. We increased the amount of money 54%, can you imagine, in that bill for this area. And Steve worked very, very hard along with the rest of our folks to get $107 million above the line, or you wouldn't be seeing all that construction work out there on the bridge that goes over the Cuyahoga River on I-90. And I want to mention one other thing. He had the guts to stand up early on and say we needed to reauthorize the Surface Transportation Act. I don't know if you know this or not, folks. We have not reauthorized that bill. We're on 2-year continuing resolutions. And Steve said we've got to have a robust reauthorization. I agreed with him, and we both understood it would take increase in the gasoline tax. But he was one of the few people, and I met with some of his colleagues over there. They all said, no, we can't do that. I said, Ronald Reagan did it, 92. What's wrong with you? And the only guy that had the guts to stand up and say this is what has to be done is Steve LaTourette. Fantastic. There aren't too many people around that have that guts to do what's right. And that bill, if we'd got it through Steve, it would have done infrastructure, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and we'd have used less gasoline. And then the Ashtabula River. Do you remember the Ashtabula River? Steve was able to get the money. That was the first project under the Great Lakes Legacy Act, so that we finally cleaned up that river and that harbor, and it's one of the most significant cleanups in the history of the Great Lakes. And then I remember BRAC, Steve. Do you remember? Do you remember BRAC? Yeah, they were going to close down DFAS, move everything to Indianapolis, Indiana. Steve got up, said, no, you're not. Worked together, and as a result of that, DFAS is here, and we've created more federal jobs because of the work that this man has done for our community. So, Steve, you've heard it. You've always been there for us. And I think you should take comfort in the fact that you have truly made a difference for your fellow man, and I think have adhered to the highest standards of a public servant. for any young person that's thinking about a role in government, you are a role model for those individuals. So it's my honor tonight to present this in tribute to public service to my good friend, Steve LaTourette. Steve, will you come forward?
Well, thank you very much. And when Mayor Akers called me, his description was exactly right. I don't know if I deserve this or not, but I'm very grateful for it. And as I look over the list of people who have received the award in the past, it's humbling. I mean, it's funny, the namesake of the award, Mercedes Cotner. You may remember we didn't have very many television stations back when I was growing up, and so you had 3, 5, 8. And we were really excited when we got the UHF, and you could watch Channel 25, and then there was a 55 and a 48 and something. But so I spent a lot of my youth because we didn't have a lot of money to come and go on. I watched Cleveland City Council meetings on television, and I don't know why, but I did, and I saw Mercedes Cotner as the fixture that she was. You'd have councilmen come and go, but she was always there. Sort of. We had the passing of Margaret Thatcher today. I think she was the Margaret Thatcher of the Cleveland City Council, so it's an honor to be mentioned in the same breath as her. The other thing I watched was that Carnival kickback trial. I don't know if you remember that, but man, that was great television, and it went on for a very long time. And the other thing I noticed in the tribute in the video, when did Jay Westbrook get gray hair? I mean, he all of a sudden went gray on us, and the rest of us looked the same as we did way back when. But to be introduced or have the award given to me by Governor Voinovich is a great honor. Like so many people throughout the audience, very instructive, and I look to him and others, a guy named Ralph Regula, as mentors in terms of how you should conduct yourself. And if I came close, then I've done my job. A couple things. President Berkman, first time I met President Berkman, he had just gotten the job, and I think he came from Florida International University, right? And they just had that fight where all the band ran on the field, and they were all slugging each other, and the football players. And I said, well, you're lucky you came to Cleveland, because it's much calmer here. But I just recently, while reading The Plain Dealer, I think maybe you're going, wish you were back in Florida, based upon some of the things that are going on. But I want to talk about my affinity for the Cleveland State University, because I am one of those people that, but for the Cleveland Marshall College of Law, I wouldn't be standing in front of you today. Long story, some of you heard, I went to the University of Michigan, so I'm really going to wrap this up so I can watch them win the national championship. I went to the University of Michigan after giving up a scholarship at Case Western Reserve to follow a girl that I dated, and accumulated about $40,000 in student loans, which was a lot of money back in 1976. And the day we graduated, she dumped me, but I still had the loan bill. And my parents, surprisingly for the students in the audience, weren't real interested in participating in my continued education funding. And so I had to get a job at 68th and Bessemer driving a forklift, and I couldn't have gone to some fancy pants law school. I mean, what I could afford to do was go to the Chester building on Chester. He didn't have the brand new building, and go a combination of days and nights. And I would tell you the interesting thing about the video tribute that was very nice that they showed, every one of the lawyers and every one of the judges that was pictured is a graduate of the Cleveland Marshall College of Law. Because with no disrespect to any of you in the audience who are lawyers who went to those fancy pants law schools, it really is the graduates of the Cleveland Marshall College of Law that run the city. Being the judges, the prosecutors, the public defenders, they run the city. You know, in Lake County, as I looked at Rick Collins, Judge Collins, and Judge Cannon, and interestingly enough, and I don't know how you got Judge Boyko, but Judge Boyko, Federal Judge Boyko, was my writing partner my first year of law school, and Tom Loby was also in that class. I don't know what Tom Loby does, if you know him, but Tom Loby, and we've been friends ever since Cleveland Marshall. So it's a great foundation. it's an honor to have my successor, Dave Joyce. And we were talking about, we had a little program over at the college prior to this that talked about, can we find the middle? And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, but I will tell you that there's all these litmus tests out there. I mean, so if you want to be a Republican, the right wing of the Republican Party has a litmus test as to whether or not you're a good Republican or a bad Republican. If you're a Democrat, you got a series of litmus tests that you got to follow. The only thing that I asked when I retired was that the Republican Party appoint somebody normal to be the member of Congress from the 14th District of Ohio. And I will tell you, they got better than normal. I mean, Dave is a great guy. He's going to be a great congressman. But for me, the fact that he's normal means a lot, because our area doesn't need the bomb throwers on the right and the left and everything else. It needs somebody who's going to roll up their sleeves and said, here's the problem, now how do we fix the problem? Not how can I get credit for fixing the problem, or how can I make sure that the other party takes the blame because the problem isn't fixed. How do we fix the problem for the people that elected us? And you're going to find in Dave Joyce exactly that kind of person. And I will tell you that what propelled me out the door, and then I'll be quiet and shut up because it's almost tip-off time. What propelled me to leave after 18, I've had a great career. I mean, and that's why I'm really humbled by this award. I had a great career. I mean, as a kid that grew up on Essex Road in Cleveland Heights, if you would have told me that I would have gotten to ride on Air Force One a bunch of times, and I always stole the peanuts, because you gotta, if you come to my house, I got a big drawer full of Air Force One peanuts. But on one occasion, you know, and this is somebody mentioned friendship and loyalty. And I know my friend Umberto Fideli's here, and we always talk about one of the things that's missing today is loyalty. I mean, when your friend gets in trouble, you don't cut and run on him just because he's having a tough time, and you stay true. So President Bush, anyway, you may have noticed George W. Bush, towards the end of his second term, he wasn't so popular with the American public, and he was coming to Cleveland. And he called up and he said, I'm coming to Cleveland and nobody wants to ride with me on Air Force One. I said, well, you go. I said, what, are you kidding me? You had me at hello. And I was the only guy on the plane with the president. And we're sitting in, if you've seen that movie, Air Force One, it's just like that, except, you know, he got a little mad at me when I said, hey, where's the escape pod, you know, in case something bad happens. But the office is just like it is in the movie. And it was just he and I, and he says, do you want something to drink? I said, sure, I'll have something to drink. And I don't drink anymore, but at the time I said, I'd like Jack Daniels. All of a sudden, a guy shows up with a Jack Daniels. He said, are you hungry? I said, yeah, I'm hungry. He said, what do you want to eat? I said, well, pizza's good. So he calls the guy, brings in a pizza. It's just me and the president having a pizza. And I'll tell you, again, I've had a great career, and it's been a wonderful career. But what caused me to leave is, and that's why, for the students in the audience, I got to tell you, public service, people love to make fun of people in public life. But if we don't have good people in public life, we're going to lose this fight. And it is a fight. But you always have to balance the good you can do with the cost to you and your family. And when the cost becomes greater than the good you can do, it's time to go. We have people in both parties who are more interested in keeping an issue alive than finding a solution, who are more interested in creating a problem and trying to get a leg up in the next election than they are in governing. And Pat Sweeney, I thought, had one of the better lines at our seminar a little earlier. It used to be we would have elections. We'd be Republicans, we'd be Democrats, we'd fight it out, we'd duke it out, but when the election was over, we were elected officials. And what we were elected to do was solve the problems that the people had elected us to solve. That's gone today. And we really need to get young people and old people and middle-aged people revved up to go back and say, you know what? We expect you to solve this problem. And stop pointing fingers. But, you know, so much finger pointing. You know, I'll go to an audience and, well, you know, the reason we have a deficit is George Bush's fault. And I'll go to another audience and they'll say, well, it's Barack Obama's fault. You know what? It's all our faults. And everybody got to this point together. And if there's a positive note that I can leave you with tonight, on Wednesday, the president's going to unveil his budget. And presidential budgets are sort of jokes, and they have been the entire 18 years I was there. They're not intended to be taken seriously. They are political statements. They're really not budgets. And so, for instance, one year, President Clinton, when he was the president, he sent up a budget that completely zeroed out the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers funding. Now, he knew that those of us who live on the Great Lakes or near a river were not going to let our residents be underwater, and we were going to replace that money. But it was a shell game, and he wanted to spend more money in another account. Another time, President George W. Bush sent up a budget, and it had zero for Amtrak. Now, I happen to like Amtrak, and he knew darn well that those members who lived in the Northeast Corridor weren't going to stand for zero, and so the money was replenished, but he wanted to spend it for something else. And so it's always a gimmick. If the Republicans control the House of Representatives and the president is a Democrat, we always put the president's budget up and vice versa. Democrats did it to George Bush. And they always say, here's the president's budget. All those in favor say aye, all those favor, and nobody ever votes for it. I mean, it loses like 435 to nothing, because they are not serious documents. However, I will tell you that if the advertisement is true, that President Obama's budget that he's going to unveil on Wednesday, is, if the reports are accurate, this is a giant step forward that we as Americans should not miss. Because what has divided us are the Republicans say no revenue, no taxes. The Democrats say stay away from Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I'm telling you, the mess was created by both models. Our level of revenue in this country is the same level of revenue that we had as a percentage of GDP in 1959. That's not sustainable. If you look at the middle-class entitlement programs, when Social Security started, the life expectancy in this country was 63. Today it's 79. And now that I'm unchained and I don't have to run for office, I go into a senior center and I tell them, you were all supposed to be dead before you got Social Security. You weren't even supposed to be, around for Social Security. So those positions are not sustainable. Those positions are not sustainable. And the next couple of weeks, as voters, as concerned citizens, as people who care about things, or you wouldn't be here tonight, you need to take the opportunity to call the White House, to call our senators, to call Davy Joyce and Marcia Fudge and everybody else and say, look, you can fight like cats and dogs tomorrow, but today, find a way out of this mess. And the way out of the mess, I'm really sorry to do that to you, Davy. And the way out of this mess is everybody's got to give a little. Everybody has to take a sacred cow, walk it to market, and say, you know what, I'm going to put a little bit in this thing. And if we seize this opportunity, this country's going to be okay. If we fumble it and turn it into a bumper sticker and again retreat into our red and blue corners, I'm going to tell you, it won't matter what you care about. Because if you look at $3.6 trillion is what the federal budget is. The amount of money we take in is only 2.2. It means we're borrowing 1.4, 40 cents of every dollar. Nobody has the courage to take on the entitlements. The Republicans don't have the courage to take on revenue or defense. And so where does all the money come? Where's all the squeezing happening? In an account called non-defense discretionary, which is education, it's the environment, it's roads and bridges, it's everything else the government does except for defending the nation and paying out the middle-class entitlements. The opportunity is now, and I hope if you could do one thing for me when you leave here this evening, watch the President's budget on Wednesday and take action and make sure we don't fumble this. Thank you very much, and God bless.